Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Just going to give people a minute or so just to join, and then we'll start by rolling a video.
January 2025 is on the horizon. The ISO 13485 compliance deadline for South African medical device companies isn't just another date. It's an opportunity. If the journey seems daunting and you don't know where to start, take a breath. We're here to help. Introducing Playbook Medical, your practical entry point into ISO 13485 compliance and your step-by-step partner in navigating ISO 13485 compliance. With Playbook, the path is clear. No guesswork, just a structured approach to guide you from start to finish. Each step is laid out for you. From creating documents to defining processes, we've mapped out the essentials. Benefit from our tried and tested framework. Adapt it to your unique company needs and save precious time. Stay on track with real-time updates. Your progress, your compliance always visible, always under control. All documents are meticulously managed, ensuring consistent, up-to-date compliance. No more last-minute scrambles. With Playbook, you're always informed. Whether it's staff training, post-market vigilance, or internal audits, we've got you covered. And the best part? It's not just about ISO 13485. Manage your SAPRA licenses, keep all contracts in a central secure platform. All from one reliable platform. With Playbook Medical by your side, January 2025 isn't a deadline. It's a milestone you're going to be ready for. Join us this year and enjoy a 20% discount, even if you kickstart your journey in Q1 2024.
Thank you, Caroline. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the SAMED Regulatory Forum. This morning, we thought we would have somebody who is from the world of putting people into ISO 13485 on the forum. So that's what we'll be covering today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Madeline Pierce. I'm the chair of the SAMED Regulatory Committee and member of the SAMED board. I just wanted to make sure that we are on track in terms of the protocols for this meeting. We have to make sure that we are in congruence with the disclaimer around conflicts of interest and competition law as a group of competitors meeting. You see the SAMED values on the slide. We ask you to bear this in mind when engaging with any stakeholders, representatives, and each other. There are competition law do's and don'ts, which you have to bear in mind. We need to safeguard against any anti-competitive discussion. We're also recording the session, and by participating, you're consenting to being recorded. So just bear that in mind. We welcome all questions. please put them in the chat as you hear the presenter, and then I can manage the Q&A, and you can raise your hand at any time as well, because we'd like to keep this dynamic and have a conversation this morning. Okay, this is the final regulatory forum for 2023. We've covered a lot of topics: the regulatory landscape in Middle East and Africa. We've covered radiation control, medical technology requirements. We've had a session on our regulatory challenges as an industry. We looked at regulatory harmonization. That was during the SAMED conference. And we overviewed the South African regulatory requirements and discussed ISO 13485. And we've had an open discussion on draft fees and regulations and what their impact could potentially be. So it's been a really rich year of discussion, and I hope you as SAMED members have felt included and have had that you've had the opportunity to express your worries and concerns about the landscape as it's evolving in the medtech world in South Africa, and that you feel supported by your trade association. We'll definitely have more of these regulatory forums next year, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank the office of SAMED for all the background work, getting the speakers, organizing the meetings. Thank you guys, you've been awesome, Caroline and the team. And yeah, it has made a big difference to the regulatory committee and the work that we do, and to the members who fed back to me and said that they've enjoyed what was covered. All right, so this morning we're going to talk about ISO 13485. As you know, that there's going to be an expectation for most companies to have this certification, and there's a bit of a hurdle for people. So we thought we'd bring a speaker who is experienced in this. All right, so let's just talk about bridging the ISO 13485 gap. The deadline is 16th of January 2025, as aligned to the SAPRA's 3-year extension on the requirement. After this deadline, you're going to have to supply an ISO 13485 certificate as a license requirement when you apply for a new license or renew your license. We continue to urge members not to delay on this implementation. And in our efforts to ensure that members understand the process of an ISO 13485 audit, which would get you your certificate, we've invited Mr. Oliver Naidu from JSC Auditors. He's one of the SANIS accredited conformity assessment bodies, to share. And what he's going to cover is the benefits of ISO 13485 accreditation. He'll look at an outline of the ISO requirements and the audit process and what to expect. And we're very lucky to have Oliver speaking this morning. He has a distinguished career in the field of risk and compliance, and he's made significant strides in many industries, including the most recent foray into the medical device sector in terms of getting people accredited. Oliver heads up a team of 18 auditors with a wide-ranging operational scope across Southern Africa. So over to you, and guys, don't forget to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand. Oliver, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madeleine. Thanks to the SAMED board and the Regulatory Forum, and of course, thanks to our sponsor, Playbook, for allowing the session to happen. So good morning, my name is Oliver Naidu, and I'll be sharing today's information brief with my colleague, Lindy Foshier. And Lindy, if you can pull up the short presentation we have. What we'd like to do today, colleagues, is we realize and recognize that there's many perceptions of what ISO 13485 is. In this short session, we'd like to, in some way, demystify what the standard requires, and also, I think, provide the assurance that this standard is about how does a medical device company do business. And I don't believe it's an abstract, even though there is some tendency for people to think it's an abstract. It's about doing business, but doing it in the right way with the right processes to ultimately ensure that devices perform and the efficacy is there to validate and to guarantee or assure patient safety. So I'll chat through a couple of slides, and then Lindy, who's our expert medical device auditor, will talk through the nuts and bolts of the standard. So Lindy, the first slide talks to the benefits of ISO 13485. And as you all know, it's an international standard. Now, in Africa and in South Africa, we are quite far behind. If you look at the economies we compete against, mainly the first world economies, Western Europe, North America, Australia, etc. If you look at the number of ISO certifications in those countries, it's in the region of, I think we're around only 4 to 5% market penetration when compared to the global economy. So we have a long way to catch up, not just in the medical device field, but broadly speaking, in implementing systems that are aligned to delivering quality services and products. And the standard focuses on meeting customer requirements, and that's really paramount, that the end user is at the forefront of all of our minds. At the same time, it looks at meeting the relevant regulatory requirements that are involved in medical device and the IVD life cycle. Next slide, please, Lindy. So the benefits. Now, as Madeleine has mentioned, and I think there is a huge, there's lots of things happening in preparation for the 2025 date. But what we should bear in mind, and we should also focus on, is the benefits internally of implementing a standard that improves one's credibility. It provides assurance of quality and safe medical devices. It enables service delivery, and it compels a business, right, to make decisions based on quantitative analysis, on monitoring and measurement. It's focused very much on continual improvement. So if you're a small business and if you want to scale your business, then the standard and the framework in the standard is ideally suited to help with that. It allows for better communication as well, enhanced customer satisfaction, and training and qualification. You know, I always say ISO standards sometimes have been given the wrong slant. It's intended to have processes in place so that people in the business understand how to operate in a structured manner. So you as the MD or the CEO or the business owner, you can go to bed and sleep better at night, knowing that if a new person comes on board, you've got a system in place. Here's the structure. This is how we do business. And we believe in what we're seeing in many sectors is that businesses that have a structured framework and a defined process to manage the various activities and processes, such as customer returns, such as product specification, they are seeing an increase in profitability and reduction in waste. And if you look at the European market, there's a high number of ISO certifications, and it's been proven to be an ideal platform for a business to operate on. It allows for control and evaluation of suppliers, and ultimately, any ISO standard is about managing risk. So if you look at the ISO auditing framework, it's termed as risk-based audit. So even the audit that you would need to conduct, it's very contextual. It takes into account your operating environment. There is no one-size-fit-all approach. It looks at your resources, your personnel, the nature of your product, the extent of your footprint. So all those factors would allow one to determine, hey, what is the risk level of this business, and how do we apply a contextual approach that mitigates risk and allows for the business to meet the client need, to promote customer care, and to also enable the business to grow and to deliver on its own internal objectives as well. So that's the benefits, which I've broadly summarized. Lindy will now talk us through the actual clauses in the standard, specifically what one would need to consider in implementing these requirements. And at the end, we would gladly take questions and answers. Thanks, Lindy. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. So just an introduction. My name is Lindy Fashia, and I'm one of the auditors at JC Auditors with experience in the implementation of the standard ISO 13485, and I've been doing this for about 11, 12 years. So I'm going to go through the standard and what the requirements are. Just switch my screen, apologies. There we go. Okay. So the standard is divided into two main groups of clauses. The first is the administrative clauses, clauses 1 to 3. Those clauses are not auditable, and we refer to them as the reference clauses. Then the most important clauses are the operative clauses. That's clause 4 to 5. Those are the clauses that everybody will be audited on, and those define the specific requirements for your quality management system. So I'm going to go through the most important clauses, your operative clauses, and just discuss them a little bit. On screen, you'll see just a short summary of what those are. So clause 4 is our general clause that speaks to the general requirements and the documentation requirements of a quality management system that you're going to implement. So under your general requirements, the focus is on determining your processes, and then whilst doing that, applying a risk-based approach to those processes. So your high-risk processes, you will ensure that you have more control over. And then under, for instance, your 4.2, your documentation requirements, you will define the requirements for your documents in terms of how you control the documents, how you control your records. And there the focus is, if we look at documents in your system, how you review, how you approve those documents, how you control the documents in terms of numbering and version control, and ensuring that obsolete documents are not available to the employees to use. It also defines the requirements for having a quality policy, your quality objectives, as well as your quality manual. Another important document that is indicated as a requirement under 4.2 is your medical device file. So your medical device file is the document that describes the devices that you will either manufacture or will sell into the market. And specifically in South Africa, there is going to be specific requirements with regards to what we should have available in your medical device file. Okay, then the next clause is clause 5, which focuses on your management responsibilities. So the first clause there, 5.1, speaks towards the management commitment. This is a very, very important clause. A quality management system is as good as the buy-in it gets from management. In reality, it really needs to start at top management. Top management needs to stand behind quality management system, and all of that will filter down to each and every employee. So that's very important. So part of that responsibility and commitment is to have a quality policy available to ensure that there is quality objectives. So what do we want to achieve? And important is to follow up on those objectives to ensure that they're actually being implemented and reached, and then also doing your management reviews. 5.2, focus on your customer focus. And all it says is that each company must go back and look at the customer requirements, determine what those requirements are, and then ensure that those requirements are met in terms of either service delivery, if you do medical devices where you sell, install, and service, or whether it is that you import devices that is sold onto users. Clause 5.3 is the quality policy. There's very specific requirements for the quality policy as defined in the standard. And very important, you must write a quality policy that's really applicable to your organization in terms of what you do, in terms of the scope of your business. It must include the commitment to comply to the requirements. And typically in your quality policy, you will also define exactly what the requirements is that you want to comply to. And that provides then a framework for establishing all your quality objectives. Clause 5.4 speaks towards planning. So the initial documents where you start with planning is actually having the quality objectives in place, because that will give you a general guideline of where you want to go in terms of quality. So that's part of the planning process. And then also it defines the requirement for system planning. And then moving on to clause 5.5 with regards to responsibility, authority, and communication. It is required that within a system, when you implement a system, that every person in that process understands exactly what their role is and what their responsibility is, and then who has final authority over that process. Because it may be that you have a manager that has the authority of the process, but it is the employees that do the day-to-day activities with regards to implementation of these processes. So it's very important to define those. It also makes it easier to implement processes if everybody knows and understands exactly what they need to do in that process. It also defines the requirements for a management representative. And that's the person who, irrespective of all their other day-to-day activities or requirements, that ensure that the processes for your quality management system is documented, that report all the processes and the effectiveness of these processes to your management. And then that person must ensure that there's awareness of the applicable standard, of the quality management system, of the quality policy, etc. And that's actually a very important statement, especially if we are going to be a company that does this for the first time. It is important to ensure that you get buy-in from the whole team. And the only way you will achieve that is to making people aware of what is happening, what the documents are, why it is happening, and what it means. And in South Africa, with the requirement now being by January 2025 that you must be certified, it is in fact important that people understand that it is a requirement to continue business as such. So that's very important, and we want our management representative to ensure that these processes and training and awareness sessions in place to do exactly that. It also, under 5.5, speaks a little bit about your internal communication, which is going to be very important. Then clause 5.6 focuses around the management review. And what the standard does is it makes it very easy, in fact, because it defines exactly what is required with a management review in terms of inputs and outputs. What we need to realize is, even though management review is a requirement by the standard, we should actually be using it not as just a tick box exercise for compliance, but we should really use it to ensure that we do what we need to do. And at the end of that, it will actually lead to the improvement of all our processes. So we should really use it as a tool to see where we are going. And historically, from my experience in the field, management review, because that's the requirement, you should at least do it annually or once a year, is to actually not do it that way. To, for instance, look at doing a management type review on a more regular basis because you have your objectives and you want to achieve them. And it is impossible to follow up on the progress with regards to getting to that objective if you only do your management review as an annual process. But it's not defined, in fact, that you should do it more regularly. But that is a healthy tip for everybody out there, is to do it that way. So under the inputs for your management review, you're going to look at all the feedback that you get, including complaints. You're going to look at any reporting that you might have done to the regulatory authorities, all the audits that has happened, and that includes both your external and internal audits, how you monitor processes and product, and then how you do improvements. Under your outputs, for instance, you will look at any changes that you need to implement if there is a certain trend in the data that you collect in your day-to-day activities. That shows that you might have an issue, even though it is not realized yet. So doing improvements. And then also looking at revised regulatory requirements. And this is very important because this is something that we sometimes forget about. The standard is in the current version, but it might change. So we need to make sure that we have things in place to know when changes occur to the standard, number one. But then also there is the local requirements, that is the guidelines and the documents that SAPRA issues. And very recently, there was quite a few changes on those guidelines. So we must also ensure that we actually review the impact of all of those changes on our quality management system and on our processes. Then clause 6 is the clause that speaks towards resource management. And it tells you about all the resources that you need or need to look for or need to define and control within your company, depending on the scope of activities that you do. It gives specific requirements for human resources. And what is going to be important for companies that is just starting to create and write and implement a quality management system is to make sure that we train people, retrain people if it's required, to make sure that we upskill people if we are expanding their day-to-day responsibility, make sure that we give them the skills to do so. And then in future, specifically look at people that has the experience to do those activities. Specifically, with 13485, when we look at somebody that needs to write the QMS, that needs to implement the QMS, we want somebody with experience, preferably, or we need to make sure that those persons get the right training to ensure that they know what they are doing, and that will lead to an easier process for this whole cycle that we're going into with regards to ISO 13485 certification. Clause 6 not only focuses on the human resource, it also describes the requirements for the infrastructure and the work environment. For instance, there we must look at what kind of process equipment we need. If we're a manufacturer and we need to do certain quality control to ensure that our product is safe after we've manufactured, we need to have the equipment, the infrastructure available to do so. Going forward, it would not be optional to have certain things in place if that's part of controlling risk in your day-to-day activities. With regards to contamination control, for instance, if we are a manufacturer that either manufactures or put together procedural packs, we know that At the end of the day, these items might need to be sterilized. So for instance, in that case, we want to keep the contamination of these devices as low as possible to ensure that our sterilization process at the end of the day is effective and that it translates to a safe device being used on our patients. And always keeping in mind, and that's what I always tell people, is we must keep in mind that at the end of the day, in fact, me, you, and everybody on this meeting is the end user of all these devices that we talk about. And then clause number 7 speaks towards product realization, how we do the planning of product realization, our customer-related processes, which includes ensuring that we know what the requirements are for the product and ensuring that we know what is the requirements and to review those and actually to make sure that we meet those. It also speaks a little bit towards communication. Then design and development, basic steps of design and development is described, the planning, the inputs, the outputs, the review, verification, validation, and then the actual transfer of your designed process or your designed product into manufacturing. A lot of companies that only does import and distribution, that clause specifically will be not applicable. Then 7.4 speaks towards purchasing. So very important, we need to be in control of our purchasing process. Specifically, if we need a specific service, we need to make sure that that service that is delivered is of the appropriate quality. If we're doing calibration of equipment that we use during manufacturing, those companies need to be accredited, etc. Then we also need to make sure whatever we purchase, does it actually conform to the requirements? So we have to have processes like that in place to make sure that we know what we are getting and that it is according to the specification that we define for our suppliers and our service providers. 7.5 defines the production and service provision. So
Lindy, Lindy, could I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
We are running a bit out of time, so if you could just step on the gas a bit.
Okay.
We have, I think, eight minutes left.
Okay.
And I'll just round up at the end with the audit process. Thanks, Lindy.
Okay. So 7.5 and 7.6 defines the requirements for production and service provision, and then also all the control and monitoring and measuring that you need to have in place for those processes. Then clause 8 is the final clause that speaks towards measuring, analysis, and improvement. So how do we monitor our processes? How do we measure our processes? What do we get from the analysis of that data? And that's actually very important because we collect so much data and we do nothing with it. And what we are forced to do with this standard is to actually analyze and then do improvements according to that. This clause also defines the requirements to do internal audits. And those are the clauses of the standard. So, Oliver, do you want to take over or?
Yeah, sure, Lindy. I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks, Lindy, for, I think, giving us a clause-by-clause analysis of the standard. And I think the Eurocentric terms often can be a bit of an issue, but really, as Lindy's shown, it's about planning the processes for your business, setting objectives. An objective could be defining what's the minimum level of quality defects you would have entertained, defining the volume growth for your business. So it could be aligning it to your existing business processes. So it does not need an entire new model. Use what existing processes you have, and where there are gaps, you just bolt on the requirements, and in so doing, develop your QMS and medical device file, etc. So I hope that's given you just a very bird's eye view of the clauses in the standard. But from an audit process, what can you expect? Okay, I think there is a hand up, so I'm not sure Caroline, if you'd like us to take a question now or wait till the end.
Oliver, I think maybe if the member can just wait, we'll let you finish up and then we'll take all the questions.
Okay, I won't be much longer. I'll quickly wrap up now. So from an audit perspective, obviously one would need to apply. The application form will request information such as number of sites, nature of your business. Are you a wholesaler, manufacturer, importer, etc.? What types of devices you are engaged in. So all of those factors will be reviewed to determine what is the risk level applicable to your operations. And based on the risk level, one would then allocate a specific auditor who has competency and experience in that specific process, a number of man days determined based on the number of sites, number of employees, risk level, and then we would send you a quote formally and an agreement, and the certification agreement merely states your commitment to not just prepare for an audit, right, but to ensure that these requirements are consistently and effectively implemented throughout the course of your business. Because the idea is that the systems must mitigate any risks that are associated in the medical device supply chain. Oh, Lindy, sorry, next slide, please. I was trying to change on my side. Thank you. So for certification, once we've allocated the audit dates, we prepare an audit pack, and then we conduct a stage 1 audit, and I'll tell you what that entails in a minute. The main audit is the stage 2 audit. Subsequent to that, we do a certification committee review, where there's a few heads that together look at the evidence, look at the audit process, and validate that all the procedural and technical aspects have been adequately managed before awarding certification. Thanks, Lindy. Now, stage 1 is what I call, I think it's determining if there are sufficient provisions in place for compliance. And in fact, some people take it to be something of a gap analysis. So stage 1 looks at, are there sufficient documents in place? Do these documents address all the processes? Is there provisions in place, or have internal audits and reviews been conducted? Because this indicates that the management has in fact got a handle of the requirements. Then we look at communication from external and interested parties, and how have these been responded to, specifically if there have been quality concerns around medical devices. Stage 2, this is really where all the fun and games happen. So here the auditor will focus on how have the systems been implemented. And here we look a lot on records to determine, is there traceability? Is there evidence of calibration? If there's product recalls, how have this been handled? A big focus is on performance monitoring. And you'll see with the ISO 13485 standard, one has to monitor and measure so that you have a very good assessment of your performance, both in terms of operational aspects and technical and efficacy of the product to the end user as well. And the idea is the auditor will look at your operational control and how effectively is there improvement being embraced within the business operations. And of course, as Lindy mentioned, we cannot achieve certification if the people in the business are not aware, if they're not being trained, if they aren't understanding exactly what the key fundamentals are in terms of their specific inputs into delivering on quality of the end product. Post-certification, once you've conducted stage 1 and stage 2 audit, and once the review has been concluded with the certification committee, and if all is in order, we then award certification, and you get a document stating you can use the logo to obviously proudly proclaim your certification, with certification marks that you can use to market your business and to claim certification. And we also would expect, if you receive client feedback that indicates the system might be deficient, we would like to know what that is so we can determine to what extent will the auditor need to come back on site to mitigate and to help manage any serious concerns that may arise from client complaints and feedback. Thanks, Lindy. Next one, please. In terms of the ISO 17021, which is the auditor standard or auditing standard, there is a 3-year cycle. So year 1 would entail stage 1 and stage 2 audit. Subsequent to that, there's an annual surveillance audit, which is looking at a sample of activities over the next 2 years. And then after year 1 and year 2 surveillance, we then go on to a recertification cycle, which then again validates that all the requirements have been consistently implemented. And I should say, the auditors are not there to trap you to try and find problems. We're there to look at how effectively have you managed risk, are all the provisions in place required by the standard and regulations, and is there the commitment to ensure that the product going to the end user or the patients are at least risk as possible. And that really is the audit approach we have. And we would like to, especially in the upcoming months, help to create that awareness around the audit process and help to bring an understanding of what the audit will require subsequent to the 2025 deadline that's been announced. Thanks, Lindy. Next one. I think it's okay. So the cost of an audit is determined by the scope, number of employees, number of sites, and risk level. When you're choosing your certification body, please ensure that you've got proof they are SANAS accredited and they have approval from SAPRA. And I would also suggest, in addition to that, request for the auditor competency in your industry so that you know that the person coming to site has the required competence to deliver value to your business. The time between stage 1 and stage 2 depends very much on the current level of performance. If you're already at a high level at stage 1, then the time between stage 1 and 2 can be very short, a week or 2 even. But if there are significant gaps at stage 1, you might need 6 months or longer to correct. So it all depends on what we find at stage 1 that will determine the time frame for stage 2. Okay, next one, Lindy. So subsequent to the audits, there is a time frame that we will allow for any non-conformities to be addressed. And I think the last question is, how much time do you need? It's a difficult one to answer. If you've got nothing in place, we would recommend around 9 months if you've got nothing. If you already have a fairly good document system in place and good structures in place, it could take a shorter period. What you should do quite soon is to do a gap analysis saying, here's what we have, here's what the standard requires, and where are the gaps? And that will then determine or influence the time that you need to get ready for certification. I think that's about it, Lindy. Next one, I think it's all there is. Okay, I think
Yes, Oliver, that's it.
Great. Thanks, Lindy. And yeah, thanks very much, Caroline. I think we've just about made it in terms of our time allocation. So over to you, and thanks again for allowing us to chat to the SAMED members.
Thanks, Oliver. Thanks, Lindy. Does anybody have any questions at this stage that they would like to? You can put your hand up and I'll try and field them for you. All right, I see Sarah Brawns. Go ahead. Sarah?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So how would we manage multiple site certification through 13485? So for instance, we've got a primary site, which is 13485 certified, and then we have got multiple sites dotted around. How would we manage those sister site certification? Would we be able to link them back and use our main site certification through SAPRA?
Can I answer that, Oliver?
Yes, sure. Go for it, Lindy.
Okay, so Sarah, this is a real hot button because we were told by the previous people at SAPRA that you could have one ISO certification as long as it covers, your quality manual covers all the sub-sites.
Okay.
There seems to have been a bit of a backtrack on this. I will be raising this at the ITG, because what you should have, in my opinion, is a ISO 13485 quality manual that is audited across all sites. So they can go, so say, for example, you've got a medical device establishment license for your main office, and then you've got a couple of provincial footprints. Then what you do is you do a risk-based analysis on the activities that are happening in the various sites, and you put that into your quality manual in terms of procedures that are followed, personnel, what is their training, who has the oversight, what are the records, what are the KPIs, and that can be audited whether you're in Johannesburg or in Durban or Cape Town. So it's one certification. Now, there is a sentiment in the regulator that they want to make every sub-site an establishment licensed outfit. I think that that's completely the wrong approach. It's not seen anywhere else in the world. And I also think it is a consultant who's thinking about multiplying the clients available in the market. And I think that this is something we need to stamp out. So watch that space. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you very much.
All right. Yes, Phil? Oh, sorry, Oliver, did you want to respond?
I would say 100% agree with you, Madeleine. I think it's the wrong approach, even though SAPRA seem to strongly favor that individual site license. We've also mentioned to them the complexities around this and the fact that it could be superfluous if the head office controls and manages all sites efficiently. But I think you have a much louder voice than we do. So I think you speaking to them would certainly hope to make them see the light. Thanks, Madeleine.
All right. Thanks, Oliver. I see Yasil.
Yes, hi. Sorry. I'm having connection issues. So I think this question might have been asked or not asked. It was covered by Madeleine. How would ISO accreditation apply to a company who's solely a distributor of medical devices rather than a manufacturer?
This is exactly up Lindy's street. Lindy, go for it.
Hi, so it will apply currently in the current format and as the draft regulations is written, it will apply to a distributor, because as a distributor, you still have the objective of ensuring that you import and you distribute, and as part of that, it is a service delivery that you do so at a level that ensures that product is safe and that product is of the quality that is required, and that you deliver that service to your customer at an acceptable level. And a simple example, I'm just going to take one example. What do I mean with that? Is if we are importing any devices that's, for instance, sterile, there is very specific quality requirements around those products. They need to be transported, they need to be stored at specific environmental conditions. So even if you are just distributing, so you are getting those products either from import or buying them from a local manufacturer, you are still required to implement all those environmental requirements. And in that way, the ISO standard is applicable to a distributor, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, Lindy. Thank you.
So it will be a very small scope. You don't need a very elaborate quality management system. It will be a small scope, very few documents, but you still need that control over the devices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lindy.
Thanks, Lindy. I see Dr. Felicitas. Go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the presentation, Oliver. My name is Felicitas from IBRATSA, one of the recognized certification bodies. Just to add on to the previous speaker, indeed, the 13485 is applicable to distributors, and it is clearly spelled out in the scope. which is clause 1 of the standard. Economic players in the life cycle of the medical device are covered by the standard. So that's what I wanted to contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Felicitas. I see Abdul Kader.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Just question is complementary to Sarah's question. So my question is, following an acquisition, and we imagine at the time of the certification, if we still have two legal entities, so the combination not yet completed, but the two entities are managed via the same quality management system and the same team. Is the certification will need, is there room to have one certification, ISO certification, to combine both entities, or it will be mandatory to have two separate?
Okay, so here the ISO 17021 auditing standard allows for integrated audits or combined audits. In your case, until the legal entities have been merged, we can do a combined audit, meaning we do one audit on both entities. But it is important in that context that both entities should have the same systems in place for that provision to be allowed. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. But just the specific, I'll say, detail is, yeah, we can do a same audit because it will be same team, same QMS, but at the end, will we need two separate certificates?
That is
Because
entirely up to you.
if at that time you still have SAPRA, two different SAPRA licenses.
Right, so if we do the combined audit approach, then we will issue two separate certificates.
Clear, thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. I see Yastil again. Is that an old legacy hand, or have you a new question?
No, sorry, that's an old hand.
Okay, Helena, go ahead. Helena, do you want to unmute yourself for your question?
Thank you. Sorry for that. I just would like to find out, you know, if you now want to start the certification process, I understand, and I followed the whole presentation. However, I just want to take it one step further. I've also read this, SAMED distributed the proposed new fees of SAPRA, where there's I think it's 435,000 registration fee per device. Now, the question to be asked is all your, let's say, 5 devices you sell, is it 435,000 per device, or is it 435,000 for your range of products you sell? What's that fee?
Okay, so maybe I can just help with that, Helena. There are various fees. Obviously, you know, you have your establishment license fee, you have your annual retention fee, you have your 5-year renewal fee, and then for the products that get called up. So just a small cohort of products will be called up into a pilot, and SAPRA will be charging a certain amount of money. I think it's around 6,000 per medical device. What we are doing as your trade association is we've put in comments, first of all, to ask for this fee schedule to be scrapped altogether and redone to suit the medical device industry, because unfortunately it was based off a methodology from pharma, which is not appropriate. Because as you know, many medical device companies have multiple line items, and it would add up to an enormous amount of money to pay for registration fees. So we have attacked that particular issue, and we will continue to raise it until we get some sort of reasonable response. So at the moment, I think the way you've got to read it is, if you have products that are considered high risk, so Class D, and that also have a commonality with the high disease burden in South Africa. So, for example, HIV, tuberculosis, those kinds of diseases, it is likely that your products will be called up. in the short term, and I'm thinking in a year, maybe. That's optimistic, I guess. So what I want to tell everybody is, this is just my opinion. It's not like I have any inside information, but from my discussions with SAPRA, that's what I know. And then what I would say is that it will be through grouping of types of devices that logically fit into a similar technical file. So watch this space. We will be keeping the industry appraised, but it is something that we need to fight because it's a heavy fees burden if it stays as it is. So thank you for the question. Does that answer you?
Thank you. Yes.
All right, good. I see Kay. Go ahead, Kay.
Hi, Madeline. Thank you. I see that SAPRA has also been teasing inspections a little bit. So would the inspection be, SAPRA's inspection be done outside of ISO 13485 certification?
Again, I think that is a sort of hangover from the farmer. Okay, look, obviously the regulator has the mandate and the ability to do inspections. And I mean, the way it should work is that you are audited by your conformance assessment body, the people who give you the certificate. And that is how quality and compliance is maintained. So that's why it's important to have a trustworthy partner who can actually provide you with a good certificate. But if things start to go wrong, you might have SAPRA turning up to inspect. So this is something that we also need to, clarify with them. I think at the moment they're still very much thinking about it in terms of a farmer model.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Lorinda, go ahead.
Thank you, Madeleine. I would just like some clarification with regards to a distributor and a manufacturer. I do understand that after one of the meetings for the registration, the labeling, if you are a distributor, the labeling would require that you are actually now a manufacturer, and that will influence the ISO 13485 auditing process. Can you clarify, do we misunderstand? I would really like some information with regards to this.
Okay, I'm going to be, yeah, I mean, this is also a huge issue, Lorinda, and Oliver, please feel free to chip in. But what I wanted to say is, strictly speaking, in terms of the definitions, if you are putting a label on a product within the borders of South Africa, you are a manufacturer. Now, if you look at the regulations, everybody will end up being a manufacturer. So there's going to have to be some sort of concession or understanding of the impact of the requirement to put labeling on. And we're actually asking for no label to be put on. We don't believe that this is a requirement. It's not required in other countries. I mean, some countries do require it, but it's often a reason why people don't market in a country, is they don't want to go through the process of setting up a labeling process. So yeah, Oliver, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Well, I think you said it exactly. If it's labeling, it's deemed to be manufacturing, and then one would need to comply with the relevant applications for manufacturing.
Indeed, thank you. Lorinda, does that answer you for now? Look, this is something, it's a hot button. It's on our list.
Yes, I think what I will do is with the auditors decide, because I was asked to register as a manufacturer. I don't manufacture it just for the case of the labeling. And now they ask me to re-register as a distributor because I'm not manufacturer. And I don't want to go through that process again if I, in the end, still has to be a manufacturer. So it complicates matters, but I think the best would be to take it up with the auditor and we must make a decision.
Okay, so we have our ITG Medical Device Working Group meeting on the 20th of November, and this is going to be on the agenda because I know a lot of companies are asking the very same question, Lorinda. And it impacts what kind of license you have. It impacts all sorts of things in terms of your QMS and how you set up your operations. So your comment is certainly on point. Nikiwe.
Hi, Madeline. I just wanted to get some clarification regarding the annual surveillance audits. Is it standard across all across all conformity assessment bodies, or it is determined at the time of assessment?
It is a standard requirement in terms of the audit process. So regardless of which body one uses, it is a compulsion in order for the certification to be valid.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Oliver and Lindy, for the expose. I'm sorry, Felicitas, we ran out of time. You're welcome to put your questions in the chat. I just want to say thank you to everybody for their participation this morning. There are going to be upcoming SAMED events, and I just want you to keep in touch with us through the website, and you can also reach out to Caroline at the SAMED office if you have any further questions. But yeah, thank you again for a very informative morning. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely day further.